Let yourself settle in comfortably as we journey to the heart of Europe, to a city of 100 spires, where medieval towers pierce the sky and cobblestone streets wind through centuries of history. Close your eyes and breathe deeply as we explore Prague, the Golden City, a place where Gothic cathedrals cast long shadows and where the Vltava River flows gently through a living fairy tale. Prague is one of Europe's oldest and most beautiful cities, with a history stretching back over 1,100 years. The city was founded around 885 AD when Prince Bohemian of the Przemyslid dynasty built Prague Castle on a hill overlooking the Vltava River. This strategic location, where the river could be easily forded and where the surrounding hills provided natural defense, made it an ideal site for a settlement. From these humble beginnings, Prague would grow into the capital of the Kingdom of Bohemia, the seat of Holy Roman Emperors, and eventually the capital of the Czech Republic. Unlike many European cities that were heavily damaged or rebuilt over the centuries, Prague has miraculously preserved much of its historic architecture, creating a cityscape that feels almost frozen in time. The Vltava River, the longest river in the Czech Republic, flows through the heart of Prague for about 19 miles, dividing the city into distinct districts and creating the geography that would shape Prague's development for over a millennium. The river stretches 270 miles from its source in the Bohemian forest to where it joins the Elbe River in northern Bohemia. In Prague, the Vltava is crossed by 18 bridges, each with its own character and story, creating connections between the castle district on the left bank and the old town on the right. The river has been both blessing and challenge, providing transportation, trade, and beauty, but also occasionally flooding and threatening the city. The relationship between Prague and its river is intimate and essential, with the Vltava appearing in countless paintings, photographs, and even in classical music, most famously in Bedřich Smetana's symphonic poem The Moldau, which musically depicts the river's journey through the Czech countryside. Breathe slowly now as we approach Prague's most iconic landmark, Charles Bridge, the ancient stone bridge that has connected Prague's two banks since the 14th century. Construction began in 1357 under the orders of King Charles IV, and according to legend, the foundation stone was laid at exactly 5:31 a.m. on July 9th, 1357. A precise moment chosen by the king's astrologers as particularly auspicious, creating the palindrome 135797531. The bridge took 45 years to complete, finishing in 1402, and for over 400 years, it was the only bridge crossing the Vltava in Prague. The bridge spans 1,700 feet and is supported by 16 arches, wide enough that it once accommodated a full market with stalls, jousting tournaments, and public executions. Today, Charles Bridge is a pedestrian-only zone, lined with 30 baroque statues added between 1683 and 1928, each depicting Catholic saints and religious scenes, creating an outdoor gallery of sacred art that visitors pass beneath as they cross from Old Town to Lesser Town. Let your mind drift to the legend that surrounds Charles Bridge's construction, for the story says that eggs were mixed into the mortar to strengthen the bridge's structure. When Charles IV called for eggs from all corners of his kingdom, one town supposedly sent hard-boiled eggs, not understanding the request, whether true or not. Modern analysis has confirmed that the mortar does contain organic materials that may have contributed to the bridge's extraordinary durability, allowing it to survive floods, wars, and over 6 centuries of constant use. The bridge has become a symbol of Prague itself, solid, enduring, beautiful, and steeped in both history and legend. Prague Castle, perched on its hill overlooking the city, holds the distinction of being the largest ancient castle complex in the world, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, covering an area of nearly 70,000 square meters, about 18 acres. The castle isn't a single structure, but rather a complex of palaces, churches, gardens, and fortifications built and modified over more than 1,000 years. Within its walls stands St. Vitus Cathedral, a Gothic masterpiece that took nearly 600 years to complete, from its foundation in 1344 until its final completion in 1929. The cathedral's soaring spires, intricate stained glass windows, and elaborate stone carvings make it one of the finest examples of Gothic architecture in Central Europe. The castle has served as the seat of power for Bohemian kings, Holy Roman emperors, and presidents of Czechoslovakia and the Czech Republic, making it not just a historic monument, but a living center of Czech national identity and political life. Now breathe deeply and picture the Prague Astronomical Clock, mounted on the southern wall of Old Town Hall and dating back to 1410, making it the third oldest astronomical clock in the world and the oldest one still operating. This medieval marvel is actually two clocks in one. The upper dial shows the position of the sun and moon in the sky, along with astronomical details that would have been crucial to medieval scholars, while the lower dial displays the months of the year, the medallions representing the zodiac signs and scenes of rural life. Every hour from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., the clock performs its famous show. The figure of death rings a bell while the 12 apostles appear in windows above the clock, nodding to the crowd below. A golden rooster crows, and the hour is struck. This mechanical theater has drawn crowds for over 600 years, a testament to medieval engineering and artistry that continues to captivate modern visitors who gather in the square, necks craned upward, waiting for the ancient mechanism to spring to life. The old town square where the astronomical clock stands has been Prague's central gathering place since the 10th century, originally serving as a marketplace connecting trade routes across Europe. The square has witnessed coronations, executions, protests, celebrations, and revolutions, the full spectrum of human drama played out on its cobblestones. The square is surrounded by buildings representing nearly every architectural style: Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, Rococo, and Art Nouveau, each structure adding another layer to the visual richness of this space. In the square center stands the Jan Hus Memorial, erected in 1915 to commemorate the 500th anniversary of the death of Jan Hus, the Czech religious reformer who was burned at the stake in 1415 for heresy. Hus became a symbol of Czech resistance to foreign domination and religious freedom, and his memorial serves as a reminder of Prague's complex religious and political history. Prague earned the nickname the City of 100 Spires because of the numerous towers and steeples that rise above its skyline, creating a distinctive silhouette that has enchanted visitors for centuries. While the actual number of spires exceeds 100, some counts put it closer to 500. The nickname captures the vertical drama of Prague's architecture. These towers served various purposes: church bell towers calling the faithful to prayer, defensive watchtowers scanning for approaching enemies, and astronomical towers for observing the heavens. Many towers are open to visitors who can climb their narrow spiral staircases to viewing platforms, offering panoramic vistas of terracotta rooftops, winding streets, and the Vltava River flowing through it all. The most famous include the twin towers of St. Vitus Cathedral, the Old Town Hall Tower, and the Lesser Town Bridge Tower, each offering a slightly different perspective on this remarkably preserved medieval cityscape. As you rest, imagine standing atop one of these ancient towers at twilight, watching the sun set behind Prague Castle, the city's lights beginning to twinkle like earthbound stars, the sound of distant church bells marking the hour, and the Vltava reflecting the deepening blue of the evening sky. Let your breathing slow as we descend from the towers and explore the Golden Lane, a picturesque alley within the Prague Castle complex that seems to belong more to a storybook than to reality. This narrow, cobblestone street is lined with tiny, colorful houses built directly into the castle's fortification walls in the late 16th century. The lane gets its name from the goldsmiths who supposedly worked here in the 17th century, though its earliest inhabitants were actually castle guards and their families who lived in these cramped dwellings. The houses are painted in vibrant shades of blue, yellow, pink, and green, each one barely wide enough for a single room, yet they've been meticulously preserved and now house small museums, shops, and exhibitions. The most famous resident was Franz Kafka, the Prague-born writer who rented house number 22 in 1916 to 1917 and wrote some of his enigmatic stories here. Walking through Golden Lane feels like stepping into a medieval village frozen in amber, a place where you can almost hear the echo of centuries-old footsteps on the worn stones. Now let your thoughts drift to the Jewish quarter of Prague, known as Joseph, one of the most historically significant Jewish communities in Europe. Jews have lived in Prague since at least the 10th century, and by the Middle Ages, the Jewish quarter had become a thriving center of Jewish scholarship, culture, and commerce. The area was enclosed by walls and gates, with Jews required to live within its boundaries, a ghetto in the original sense of the word. Despite centuries of persecution, expulsions, and restrictions, the Jewish community not only survived but flourished intellectually and culturally. The Old New Synagogue, completed around 1270, is the oldest active synagogue in Europe and one of the oldest Gothic buildings in Prague. Its name comes from the fact that it was new when built, replacing an earlier synagogue, but eventually became old as newer synagogues were constructed, leading to the seemingly contradictory name Old New. The synagogue has survived fires, pogroms, and the Nazi occupation, standing as a testament to the resilience of Prague's Jewish community. Breathe deeply and picture the legend of the Golem, the mythical creature of Jewish folklore that is inextricably linked with Prague. According to the most famous version of the story, Rabbi Judah Lo ben Bezalel, known as the Maharal, created the Golem in the late 16th century from clay taken from the banks of the Vltava. Using Kabbalistic rituals, he brought the creature to life by placing a shem, a piece of paper with a sacred name written on it, in its mouth or on its forehead. The Golem served as a defender of the Jewish community, protecting them from attacks and false accusations. However, the Golem grew increasingly violent and uncontrollable, prompting the rabbi to deactivate it by removing the shem. Legend says the Golem's remains are hidden in the attic of the Old New Synagogue, waiting to be reawakened in a time of dire need. This story has inspired countless retellings and adaptations, becoming one of Prague's most famous legends and a symbol of both creation and the dangers of creating something beyond one's control. Let yourself relax as we explore Prague's miraculous survival through World War II, for the city is one of the few major European capitals to emerge from the war largely intact. While cities like Warsaw, Dresden, and Berlin were reduced to rubble by bombing and warfare, Prague remained remarkably unscathed, preserving its medieval and baroque architecture for future generations. The Nazi occupation from 1939 to 1945 was brutal, particularly for Prague's Jewish population. Of the approximately 56,000 Jews living in Prague before the war. Fewer than 10,000 survived the Holocaust. Most were deported to their Scienstadt, Terezin concentration camp, and from there to Auschwitz and other death camps. Yet the physical city itself was spared large-scale destruction, partly due to fortune and partly because Adolf Hitler reportedly planned to make Prague a showcase city of the Reich. The Prague Uprising of May 1945, just days before the war's end, resulted in some damage, but nothing compared to the devastation elsewhere. This preservation means that walking through Prague today provides an authentic experience of medieval and baroque Europe that few other cities can match. Now breathe slowly and contemplate the defenestration of Prague, a dramatic event that quite literally changed European history. Defenestration means throwing someone out of a window, and Prague has the dubious distinction of being famous for this particular form of political protest. The most significant defenestration occurred on May 23, 1618, when Protestant Bohemian nobles, angry over religious restrictions imposed by the Catholic Habsburgs, stormed Prague Castle and threw two imperial governors and their secretary out of a third-floor window, a drop of about 70 feet. Remarkably, all three men survived. Catholics claimed they were saved by angels or by the intervention of the Virgin Mary, while Protestants suggested they landed in a pile of manure. Regardless of how they survived, this act of rebellion triggered the Bohemian Revolt, which quickly escalated into the 30 Years' War, one of the most destructive conflicts in European history, devastating much of Central Europe and killing approximately 8 million people. Prague commemorates this bizarre yet consequential event, reminding visitors that even the most unusual incidents can have profound historical consequences. Let your mind drift to the National Theatre, Prague's stunning neo-Renaissance building that stands as a symbol of Czech national pride and cultural identity. Construction began in 1868, funded entirely by public donations from Czechs across Bohemia who wanted a theater where performances would be conducted in Czech rather than German, which dominated official and cultural life under Austrian rule. The theater opened in 1881, but tragedy struck just 2 months later when a fire destroyed the roof and much of the interior. The Czech people responded with another fundraising campaign under the slogan, "The Nation to Itself," and the theater was rebuilt and reopened in 1883. The building's exterior and interior were designed and decorated by leading Czech artists of the generation, creating a Gesamtkunstwerk, a total work of art that celebrates Czech history, mythology, and cultural achievement. The golden roof and the motto "Narod sob," the nation to itself, emblazoned across the front serve as declarations of Czech cultural independence and resilience. Even today, performances at the National Theatre carry special significance, representing the continuation of Czech cultural traditions and linguistic pride. Breathe deeply as we explore Wenceslas Square, which is actually more of a wide boulevard than a traditional square, stretching about 2,500 feet long and 200 feet wide. Named after Saint Wenceslas, the patron saint of Bohemia, the square has been the site of numerous historic events that shaped Czech and Czechoslovak history. In 1918, the establishment of Czechoslovakia as an independent nation was proclaimed here. In 1969, Jan Palach, a student protesting the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia, set himself on fire in the square, his sacrifice becoming a symbol of resistance to oppression. In November 1989, the square became the focal point of the Velvet Revolution, when hundreds of thousands of people gathered peacefully to demand democratic reforms, ultimately leading to the end of communist rule without bloodshed. The square is dominated at one end by the National Museum and in front of it stands an equestrian statue of Saint Wenceslas, surrounded by other Czech patron saints. Today, Wenceslas Square is a busy commercial area filled with shops, hotels, and restaurants, but it retains its significance as a gathering place where Czechs come together during moments of national importance. The story of the Velvet Revolution itself deserves quiet contemplation as you drift towards sleep. In November 1989, as communist regimes across Eastern Europe began to crumble, Czech students and citizens took to the streets in peaceful protests. On November 17th, a student demonstration was violently suppressed by police, but rather than intimidating the population, this brutality sparked larger protests. Within days, hundreds of thousands filled Wenceslas Square, jangling their keys, a symbolic gesture suggesting it was time for the communist government to leave and lock up. The playwright and dissident Václav Havel emerged as the leader of the opposition, and through negotiations and continued peaceful pressure, the communist government resigned. On December 29, 1989, Havel was elected president by the Federal Assembly. The entire revolution took only 42 days and achieved a complete transformation of the political system without violence or bloodshed, earning its name Velvet for its smoothness and gentleness. This peaceful transition from totalitarianism to democracy remains one of Prague's proudest moments and a powerful example of how change can be achieved through nonviolent resistance and civic courage. As you sink deeper into rest, imagine Prague in all its dimensions, a city where history lives in every stone, where legends whisper from darkened doorways, where resilience and beauty have survived centuries of upheaval, and where the Vltava continues its endless journey, carrying reflections of Gothic spires and the hopes of generation after generation. Let your breathing slow as we explore Prague's remarkable Art Nouveau architecture, a style that flourished here at the turn of the 20th century and gave the city some of its most distinctive and elegant buildings. The Art Nouveau movement, known in Czech as CCs, emphasized organic forms, flowing lines, and decorative arts integrated into architecture. The municipal house, completed in 1912, stands as perhaps the finest example of Art Nouveau architecture in Prague, and indeed in all of Central Europe. This stunning building features elaborate facades decorated with mosaics, sculptures, and ornamental metalwork, while its interior contains concert halls, restaurants, and ceremonial spaces adorned with frescoes, stained glass, and intricate details created by the leading Czech artists of the era. The building's most famous space, Smetana Hall, hosts classical concerts beneath a spectacular ceiling painted with allegories of Slavic culture. On October 28, 1918, Czechoslovak independence was declared from the municipal house, making it not just an architectural treasure, but a birthplace of the modern Czech nation. Now, let your thoughts drift to the work of Alphonse Mucha, Prague's most celebrated Art Nouveau artist, whose flowing, sensuous style defined the aesthetic of an entire era. Born in Moravia in 1860, Mucha achieved fame in Paris designing posters for actress Sarah Bernhardt, but he maintained deep connections to his Czech homeland throughout his life. His masterwork, the Slav epic, consists of 20 enormous canvases depicting the history of the Slavic peoples, which he painted between 1910 and 1928 and donated to the city of Prague. These monumental paintings, some measuring over 20 feet tall, combine historical scenes with symbolic and allegorical elements, creating a visual narrative of Slavic cultural and spiritual development. The cycle represents Mucha's vision of Slavic unity and his belief in art's power to inspire national consciousness. Today, the Slav epic is displayed in Prague, though its location has been debated and moved several times, a fitting metaphor for the complex relationship between art, nationalism, and cultural identity in Czech history. Breathe deeply and picture the Prague Metro, the city's underground rapid transit system that opened in 1974 during the communist era and has since become an essential part of urban life. The metro consists of 3 lines, A, B, and C, stretching about 40 miles total with 61 stations, serving over 1 million passengers daily. What makes Prague's metro particularly interesting is that it's one of the deepest metro systems in the world, with some stations located over 170 feet underground, carved through solid rock. The depth was partly due to Prague's hilly terrain and the presence of the Vltava River, but it also served a Cold War purpose. The deep stations were designed to double as nuclear bomb shelters, equipped to protect thousands of people in the event of atomic war. The stations themselves featured distinctive 1970s Soviet-influenced design, with some decorated with murals, mosaics, and sculptural elements that reflect communist-era aesthetics. Despite its Cold War origins, the metro is now simply an efficient, clean, and affordable way to navigate the city, connecting historic districts with modern neighborhoods. Let yourself relax as we explore Prague's cafe culture, which has flourished for over 150 years and created gathering places for writers, artists, intellectuals, and revolutionaries. The golden age of Prague's cafes occurred in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when establishments like Café Slavia, Café Louvre, and Café Imperial became second homes for the city's creative and intellectual elite. These weren't merely places to drink coffee. They were institutions where ideas were debated, manuscripts were written, political movements were born, and cultural trends were established. Café Slavia, located across from the National Theatre with views of Prague Castle, was frequented by writers including Franz Kafka, Rainer Maria Rilke, and Václav Havel. During the communist era, when free speech was suppressed and gatherings monitored, cafes became even more important as semi-public spaces where coded conversations and subtle dissent could occur. Today, many historic cafes have been lovingly restored, their Art Nouveau or Art Deco interiors gleaming once more, serving strong Czech coffee and traditional pastries to a new generation while maintaining the atmosphere of intellectual engagement that defined them over a century ago. Now, breathe slowly and contemplate Petrin Hill, peaceful, forested hill rising on the left bank of the Vltava that offers respite from urban intensity and some of the finest views of Prague's spires and rooftops. The hill stands about 1,040 feet tall, and at its summit rises the Petrin Lookout Tower, built in 1891 as a loose copy of the Eiffel Tower. Though at 200 feet tall, it's much smaller than its Parisian inspiration. The tower was constructed for the Jubilee exhibition, celebrating Czech industry and culture, and climbing its 299 steps rewards visitors with panoramic views encompassing the entire city and the surrounding Bohemian countryside. Petrin Hill also contains beautiful gardens, a mirror maze dating from the same 1891 exhibition, the Church of St. Lawrence, and pathways perfect for peaceful walks among flowering trees and manicured lawns. A funicular railway, first opened in 1891 and modernized since, carries passengers from the lesser town up the hillside, eliminating the steep climb. On May Day, it's traditional for couples to walk up Petrin Hill to kiss beneath the blossoming cherry trees, believing it brings good fortune to their relationship, a romantic custom that continues to this day. Let your mind drift to the story of beer in Prague, for this is a city where beer culture runs deep and the Czech Republic maintains the highest per capita beer consumption in the world. Beer has been brewed in Prague and Bohemia for over 1,000 years, with the first known brewery established in 993 AD. The famous Pilsner style of beer was invented in the nearby city of Plzeň in 1842, revolutionizing beer-making worldwide with its golden color, clarity, and crisp taste. In Prague itself, the beer culture is centered around traditional beer halls called hospodas and pivnice, unpretentious establishments where locals gather to drink fresh Czech lagers served in half-liter glasses and to socialize for hours. The most famous Prague brewery, Ufliku, has been operating continuously since 1499, making it one of the oldest breweries in Central Europe. This dark beer brewery maintains traditional methods, brewing a single type of beer, a rich, dark lager, and serving it in the same building where it's made, accompanied by traditional Czech cuisine. For Czechs, beer isn't merely a beverage but a cultural institution, a social lubricant, and a point of national pride, with Prague serving as one of the great beer capitals of the world. Breathe deeply as we explore the Lenin Wall, a colorful monument to freedom of expression, peace, and youthful rebellion. Located in a lesser town near the French embassy, this ordinary wall became extraordinary in the 1980s when it began to be covered with graffiti inspired by John Lennon and the Beatles, whose music was banned by the communist government. After Lennon's assassination in 1980, someone painted a portrait of him and some lyrics from Beatles songs on the wall. Despite repeated whitewashing by authorities, new graffiti would appear overnight, with students and dissidents adding peace symbols, political messages, and more Beatles lyrics. The wall became a form of passive resistance, a declaration that the authorities couldn't control everything, that creativity and hope persisted even under oppression. Guards were posted to prevent graffiti, but the wall's messages kept reappearing. After the Velvet Revolution, the Lenin Wall remained and continues to be painted and repainted with messages of peace, love, and freedom. Today it's owned by the Knights of Malta, who have embraced its role as a living canvas for free expression, though they occasionally organize complete repaints to begin fresh. The wall has become a pilgrimage site for visitors from around the world who add their own messages to this ever-changing testament to the power of peaceful protest. The astronomical and mathematical brilliance of Prague's medieval scholars deserves quiet contemplation as you drift toward deeper rest. Charles University, founded in 1348 by King Charles IV, is the oldest university in Central Europe and one of the oldest in the world. The university attracted scholars from across Europe and became a center of learning in astronomy, mathematics, philosophy, and theology. The Prague Astronomical Clock we mentioned earlier represents not just artistic achievement, but sophisticated mathematical and astronomical knowledge. It tracks the movements of celestial bodies, calculates the position of the sun against the zodiac, and displays Old Czech time, Babylonian time, and modern 24-hour time simultaneously. The clock's creators understood planetary motion, the precession of the equinoxes, and complex timekeeping systems that most people of their era couldn't begin to comprehend. This tradition of scientific and mathematical achievement continued through the centuries, with Prague producing numerous astronomers, physicists, and mathematicians who contributed to humanity's understanding of the cosmos and the natural world. As you rest in perfect tranquility, imagine Prague bathed in moonlight, the castle silhouetted against the night sky, the Vltava flowing silver beneath ancient bridges, gas lamps casting pools of warm light on cobblestones, and the city settling into its centuries-old rhythm, dreaming of all it has witnessed and all that is yet to come. let your breathing deepen as we explore the Dancing House, one of Prague's most controversial and distinctive modern buildings, standing in stark contrast to the city's historic architecture. Designed by architects Vlado Milunik and Frank Gehry and completed in 1996, this deconstructivist building consists of two towers, one static and one dynamic, that lean against each other in a form suggesting two dancers, earning it the nickname Fred and Ginger after the famous dancing duo Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. The building's curved lines, unconventional angles, and modern materials created heated debates when it was proposed, with many arguing it didn't belong in Prague's historic cityscape. Yet it has become beloved by many as a symbol of Prague's post-communist transformation and willingness to embrace contemporary architecture alongside preservation of the past. The building sits on a site that was destroyed by American bombing during World War II, one of the few instances of war damage in Prague, and for decades remained vacant as a symbolic scar until the Dancing House filled it with something boldly new. Today it houses offices, a hotel, and a rooftop restaurant with spectacular views across the Vltava. Now, let your thoughts drift to the Estates Theatre, an elegant neoclassical theater built between 1781 and 1783 that holds a unique place in musical history. This theater, still operating and remarkably unchanged from its 18th century appearance, was where Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart himself conducted the world premiere of his opera Don Giovanni on October 29, 1787. Mozart had a special relationship with Prague. The city embraced his music more enthusiastically than Vienna ever did, and he visited Prague at least 4 times. He wrote Don Giovanni specifically for the Estates Theatre and its performers, and the premiere was a triumph. Mozart reportedly said, "My Praguers understand me," expressing his appreciation for the city's musical sophistication and warmth. The theater also premiered Mozart's opera La Clemenza di Tito in 1791. Sitting in the Estates Theatre today, beneath its ornate chandelier and surrounded by the same gilded boxes and painted ceiling that Mozart would have seen, audiences can experience opera and drama in an authentic 18th century setting, creating a direct connection to the golden age of classical music. Breathe slowly and picture the Church of Our Lady before 10, the Gothic masterpiece with twin spires that dominates the old town square skyline. Construction began in the 14th century, but the church wasn't completed until the early 16th century, with its distinctive spires, each 260 feet tall and topped with golden spheres, becoming one of Prague's most recognizable landmarks. The asymmetry between the two towers is deliberate, with one slightly thicker than the other, representing masculine and feminine principles, according to medieval theology. The church served as the main Hussite church in Prague during the 15th century, when religious reformers controlled the city. Inside, the church contains remarkable treasures, including a Gothic altar, baroque paintings, and the oldest pipe organ in Prague, dating from 1673. The church is also the final resting place of the Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe, who worked in Prague under the patronage of Emperor Rudolf II. Brahe died in 1601 under mysterious circumstances. Legend says his bladder burst because court etiquette prevented him from leaving a royal banquet to relieve himself, though modern analysis suggests mercury poisoning may have been the actual cause. Let yourself relax as we explore the Prague Spring Music Festival, an annual celebration of classical music that has been held every May since 1946, always beginning on May 12th, the anniversary of Bedřich Smetana's death. The festival traditionally opens with a performance of Smetana's symphonic cycle Ma Vlast, My Homeland, particularly the movement Vltava, which musically depicts the river's journey through the Czech countryside to Prague. This opening concert is held in the municipal house's Smetana Hall and is considered one of the cultural year's most important events. The festival attracts world-renowned orchestras, conductors, and soloists who perform throughout Prague's historic concert halls, churches, and palaces over 3 weeks. The Prague Spring Festival has become more than just a music festival. It's a celebration of Czech cultural identity and an affirmation of the art's importance in national life, particularly poignant given that music and culture sustained Czech identity through centuries when political independence was denied. Now breathe deeply and contemplate the story of Franz Kafka, perhaps Prague's most famous literary son, whose surreal, psychologically complex novels and stories have influenced world literature for over a century. Kafka was born in Prague in 1883 to a German-speaking Jewish family and lived most of his life in various apartments around the Old Town and Jewish Quarter. The atmosphere of Prague, its labyrinthine streets, its bureaucratic Austro-Hungarian administration, its mix of cultures and languages, its sense of being caught between German and Czech identities, permeates Kafka's work. His novels The Trial and The Castle depict nightmarish worlds of impenetrable bureaucracy and inexplicable authority that many readers have seen as metaphors for modern alienation. Kafka worked as insurance clerk, writing in his spare time, and published little during his lifetime. He died of tuberculosis in 1924 at age 40, instructing his friend Max Brod to burn all his unpublished manuscripts. Brod ignored these instructions and published Kafka's work, making him one of the 20th century's most important writers. Today, Prague embraces its connection to Kafka, with museums, statues, and tours dedicated to his memory. Though the writer himself had an ambivalent relationship with his birthplace and never achieved recognition during his lifetime, let your mind drift to the concept of the Prague Spring, not the music festival, but the political movement of 1968 that attempted to create socialism with a human face. Under the leadership of Alexander Dubček, the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia began implementing reforms, loosening censorship, allowing greater freedom of speech, and democratizing political processes while remaining within the communist framework. This period of liberalization lasted from January to August 1968, creating hope that a more humane form of socialism was possible. However, the Soviet Union and other Warsaw Pact countries viewed these reforms as threatening to communist orthodoxy. On the night of August 20th to 21st, 1968, approximately 200,000 troops from 5 Warsaw Pact countries invaded Czechoslovakia, crushing the Prague Spring and reimposing hardline communist control. The invasion was met with nonviolent resistance. Citizens argued with soldiers, painted slogans on walls, and turned street signs around to confuse the invading forces. The most dramatic protest came when Jan Palach, a student, set himself on fire in Wenceslas Square in January 1969 to protest the occupation and his country's resignation to it. The Prague Spring suppression led to 2 decades of normalization, repression, censorship, and forced conformity, until the Velvet Revolution finally brought the change that had been attempted 21 years earlier. Breathe slowly as we explore Vyšehrad, the legendary castle complex on a hill south of Prague Center that rivals Prague Castle in historical importance and atmospheric beauty. According to legend, Vyšehrad was the first seat of Czech princes, even before Prague Castle, though historical evidence suggests otherwise. The name means the high castle, and myths claim that the prophetic princess Libu's stood here and foretold the founding of Prague, saying, "I see a great city whose glory will touch the stars." While the legends may be embellished, Visegrad was indeed an important royal seat in the 11th century. Today, the fortress complex contains several significant structures. The neo-Gothic church of St. Peter and St. Paul, with its distinctive twin spires, massive fortification walls offering stunning views over the Vltava, and most importantly, Visegrad Cemetery, the burial place of many Czech cultural luminaries. The cemetery, established in the 1870s as a national pantheon, contains the graves of composers Bedřich Smetana and Antonín Dvořák, poet Jan Neruda, artists Alphonse Mucha and František Kupka, and many other figures who shaped Czech culture. The cemetery's centerpiece is the Slaven Monument, a collective tomb for honored artists. Visegrad offers a quieter, more contemplative alternative to the tourist-filled Prague Castle, a place where locals come to walk, reflect, and connect with Czech history and cultural heritage. The tradition of Czech puppetry deserves quiet contemplation as you drift toward deeper rest. Puppetry has deep roots in Czech culture, dating back to the 17th century, when traveling puppet shows entertained villagers with traditional stories, folk tales, and satire. During the 19th century, when Czech language and culture faced suppression under Austrian rule, puppet theater became a way to preserve Czech stories and language. Puppets could say things that would be censored if spoken by human actors. The most famous Czech puppet character is Spejbl, a father figure, and his son Hrvenek, created by Josef Skupa in the 1920s. During World War II, Skupa used these puppets to satirize the Nazi occupation, leading to his imprisonment, but Spejbl and Hrvenek survived and became beloved national figures. Prague is home to several puppet theaters, including the National Marionette Theater, where classic operas like Don Giovanni are performed entirely with elaborately crafted marionettes. The tradition continues today with modern puppet artists creating sophisticated works that appeal to both children and adults, maintaining puppetry's place as a living art form rather than merely a nostalgic tradition. As you sink into the deepest rest, imagine Prague in all its manifestations, ancient and modern, legendary and real, a city of music and literature, of resistance and resilience, where every cobblestone has witnessed centuries of human drama, where beauty persists despite everything, where the Vltava flows eternally onward. Let your breathing slow as we explore the Strahov Monastery, a Premonstratensian abbey founded in 1143 that sits on a hill overlooking Prague, offering both spiritual sanctuary and intellectual treasure. While the monastery itself is architecturally significant, its true glory lies within its libraries, two of the most beautiful library halls in the world. The Theological Hall, completed in 1679, features stunning Baroque stucco decoration and ceiling frescoes depicting the theme of true wisdom, while ornate walnut bookcases hold over 18,000 volumes of theological texts. The Philosophical Hall, built in 1794, is even more spectacular, with its ceiling painted with a single fresco titled "The Spiritual Development of Mankind," and floor-to-ceiling bookcases containing approximately 42,000 books. The ceiling fresco is remarkable not just for its artistic merit, but for its size. It was transferred from another monastery and had to be cut into pieces, transported, and reassembled like an enormous jigsaw puzzle. The monastery's collection survived the communist regime, which closed the monastery in 1950 and planned to confiscate its treasures, but through various circumstances and the dedication of the monks who remained in secret, The libraries were preserved. Today, visitors can marvel at these chambers where centuries of human knowledge are housed in settings of overwhelming beauty, where learning and aesthetics combine to create spaces that honor both the mind and the soul. Now, let your thoughts drift to the story of Antonín Dvořák, the Czech composer whose music brought the sounds and spirit of Bohemia to concert halls around the world. Born in a small village north of Prague in 1841, Dvořák came from humble origins. His father was a butcher and innkeeper, but his musical talent was undeniable. He eventually settled in Prague, where he composed prolifically while also teaching and conducting. Dvořák's music is deeply rooted in Czech folk traditions, incorporating the rhythms, melodies, and spirit of Bohemian and Moravian folk songs and dances. His Slavonic dances brought him international fame, while his Symphony No. 9 from the New World, written during a stay in America, became one of the most popular symphonic works ever written. Dvořák spent his final years in Prague, dying in 1904 at age 62, and was buried with great ceremony in Vyšehrad Cemetery. His music remains central to Czech cultural identity, expressing something essential about the Czech spirit, its melancholy and its joy, its rootedness in folk tradition and its sophistication, its particular flavor that is immediately recognizable yet universally accessible. Breathe deeply and picture the Powder Tower, one of Prague's original 13 city gates, which stands at the entrance to the Old Town and serves as the beginning of the royal route, the ceremonial path that Bohemian kings followed from the tower through Old Town Square and across Charles Bridge to Prague Castle for their coronations. The tower was begun in 1475 as a grand Gothic gateway celebrating King Vladislav II, but construction was halted when the king moved his residence from the city center to Prague Castle, and the tower remained unfinished for centuries. It acquired its current name in the 17th century when it was used to store gunpowder. The tower stands 213 feet tall and was extensively restored in the late 19th century in neo-Gothic style, with elaborate decorative sculpture adorning its facade. Visitors can climb 186 steps to a viewing gallery offering panoramas of Old Town's spires and rooftops. The tower serves as a symbolic gateway between medieval and modern Prague, a threshold that generations have passed through on their way into the historic heart of the city. Let yourself relax as we explore the tradition of Czech Christmas markets, which transform Prague's squares into wonderlands of lights, scents, and seasonal celebration every December. The most famous market fills Old Town Square, where wooden stalls offer traditional Czech crafts, ornaments, food, and drink beneath the glow of an enormous Christmas tree. The air fills with the aroma of trudelník, a sweet pastry cooked on rotating spools over open flames and dusted with cinnamon sugar, and svěrák, Czech mulled wine spiced with cinnamon and cloves. Traditional Czech Christmas treats include carp, which swims in large tubs at market stalls. Czechs traditionally buy live carp and keep them in their bathtubs for a day or two before Christmas dinner, a quirky tradition that continues in many households. And vinaka, a braided sweet bread enriched with eggs and butter. The markets have medieval origins, when winter gatherings allowed people to purchase supplies and celebrate before the hardest months of the year. Today's Christmas markets blend old traditions with modern tourist appeal, yet they retain something authentic, the Czech love of gathering, celebrating, and finding warmth and light during the darkest time of year. Now breathe slowly and contemplate the Czech language itself, a West Slavic tongue that serves as both a practical means of communication and a symbol of national identity. Czech uses the Latin alphabet enhanced with diacritical marks, hooks and accents that modify pronunciation, creating letters like C, S, Z, R, and A. The language is grammatically complex, with 7 cases that change word endings depending on grammatical function, 3 genders, and intricate rules for conjugation and declension. Perhaps the most distinctive Czech sound is the consonant R, which doesn't exist in most other languages and is notoriously difficult for non-native speakers to pronounce. It's something like combining the sounds of R and H simultaneously. Many Czech words seem impossible to pronounce for English speakers, with consonant clusters like Insmrzlina, ice cream, or PRST, finger. Yet the language also contains beautiful words that capture specific concepts, like lidist, a feeling of torment caused by sudden insight into one's own misery, or pohoda, a sense of contentment and well-being. The Czech language survived centuries of Germanization attempts and Russian influence, and its preservation and use remain fundamental to Czech identity and cultural continuity. Let your mind drift to the story of Wenceslas, the good King Wenceslas of the Christmas Carol, though he was actually a duke, not a king, and his story is far more complex than the cheerful song suggests. Wenceslas ruled Bohemia from 921 until his assassination in 935 at approximately age 28. He worked to Christianize Bohemia and maintain peace with neighboring powers, particularly the German kingdom, which made him enemies among Bohemian nobles who saw him as too accommodating to foreign influence. His own brother Boleslav conspired against him and had him murdered as Wenceslas was entering a church for morning prayers. Despite his short reign and violent death, or perhaps because of it, Wenceslas became Bohemia's patron saint and a symbol of Czech statehood and Christian virtue. His feast day, September 28th, is a Czech national holiday. The equestrian statue of Saint Wenceslas in Wenceslas Square shows him as a mounted warrior saint, surrounded by other Czech patron saints, watching over the square that has seen so much of Czech history unfold. The carol Good King Wenceslas, popular in English-speaking countries, tells a story of the Duke braving winter weather to give alms to a poor man, though this tale is a 19th century invention with no historical basis, but it captures something true about how Wenceslas has been remembered, as an embodiment of charity, piety, and good governance. Breathe deeply as we explore the concept of the Czech chata, or cottage culture, which might seem an odd inclusion in a narrative about Prague, yet it reveals something essential about how Prague residents relate to their city. Many Prague families own or rent small cottages in the countryside, simple structures, often without modern amenities, located in forests or near rivers or in small villages. On weekends and during summer, families escape the city for their chatas, where they garden, forage for mushrooms, swim, hike, and reconnect with nature and simpler ways of living. This tradition intensified during the communist era, when chatas provided not just recreation, but also fresh food that supplemented what was available in stores, and privacy that was harder to find in the city where neighbors might inform on each other. The chata tradition continues today, even as life has become more comfortable and free. It represents a Czech relationship with nature and rural life that persists despite urbanization, a recognition that city life, however rich culturally, needs to be balanced with time in forests and fields, that humans need both the stimulation of urban culture and the restoration of natural quiet. The question of Prague's relationship with tourism itself deserves contemplation as you drift toward deeper sleep. Prague's beauty and relatively low costs, combined with its liberation from communism and entry into the European Union, have transformed it into one of Europe's most visited cities, welcoming over 8 million tourists annually before the pandemic. This influx brings economic benefits, but also challenges. Historic streets sometimes feel overwhelmed by tourist groups. Local shops have been replaced by souvenir stores and currency exchanges, and housing costs have risen as properties convert to short-term rentals. Some residents feel their city is being transformed into a theme park version of itself, where authentic local life is increasingly pushed to the margins. Yet Prague somehow retains its soul. Step away from the main tourist routes, venture into residential neighborhoods, visit during off-peak hours or seasons, and you'll find authentic Prague, the city where people live, work, argue, fall in love, raise children, and go about their daily lives much as Praguers have for centuries. The challenge facing Prague, as with many beautiful historic cities, is maintaining this authenticity while sharing its treasures with the world, preserving what makes it special even as millions come to experience that specialness. It's a balance that each generation of Praguers must negotiate anew, honoring both their heritage and their present needs. As you rest in complete tranquility, let Prague settle into your consciousness like a dream, a city of layers and contradictions, of sublime beauty and difficult history, of soaring spires and hidden courtyards, of music echoing in concert halls and conversations in cafes, a place where the past is always present, where every street corner holds a story, and where the Vltava flows on, indifferent to centuries, connecting everything, carrying reflections of all that Prague has been and all that it continues to become. Let your breathing deepen as we explore the tradition of Czech filmmaking, which has produced some of cinema's most distinctive and acclaimed works, despite the country's small size and turbulent history. Czech film flourished in the 1960s during the Prague Spring era, with what became known as the Czech New Wave, when directors like Miloš Forman, Yuri Menzel, and Vera Kytilova created films that combined dark humor, social satire, and humanistic observation. Forman's The Fireman's Ball, 1967, used a small-town fire department's dance as a microcosm of Czech society's absurdities, while Menzel's Closely Watched Trains, 1966, won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. These filmmakers developed a distinctive style characterized by deadpan humor, non-professional actors, and gentle mockery of authority, an approach that allowed them to comment on political realities through seemingly simple stories. After the 1968 Soviet invasion, many directors emigrated, including Forman, who went on to direct Hollywood classics like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Amadeus. Yet Czech cinema survived, and post-1989 films like Kolia, 1996, about a middle-aged man reluctantly caring for a young Russian boy, won another Academy Award, proving that Czech filmmaking's humanistic voice and wry perspective continued to resonate internationally. Now, let your thoughts drift to the Vltava's Islands, small parcels of land within the river that create distinct spaces with their own characters and purposes. Kampa Island, separated from the lesser town by a narrow channel called the Devil's Stream, is one of Prague's most romantic and peaceful areas, often called the Venice of Prague because of its waterside setting and the old mill wheel that still turns in the stream. The island contains a park, galleries, and charming streets lined with historic houses. Slav Island, Slovenský Ostrov, hosts an elegant 19th century cultural center and offers green space and riverside cafes. Strelicky Island, or Shooter's Island, gets its name from the archery competitions once held there and now serves as a venue for outdoor concerts and festivals. These islands provide breathing spaces within the dense historic city, places where the river's presence is most intimately felt, where the sound of water flowing creates natural tranquility, and where Prague's relationship with the Vltava becomes most tangible and immediate. Breathe slowly and picture the Jewish cemetery, one of the most haunting and evocative sights in Prague's Jewish quarter. Established in the early 15th century and used until 1787, this small cemetery contains approximately 12,000 gravestones, though the actual number of people buried here is estimated at over 100,000. Because Jewish law prohibits removing graves and the cemetery space was extremely limited, bodies were buried in layers, sometimes 12 deep, with earth added to create new layers and gravestones rearranged above. This created the cemetery's distinctive appearance. Gravestones leaning at various angles, crowded together in apparent chaos, with the uneven ground reflecting the layers of burials beneath. Walking through this cemetery, shaded by elder trees and silent except for birdsong, creates a powerful sense of the accumulated weight of centuries, of the many generations who lived, died, and were laid to rest in this small plot of earth. The most elaborate tombstone belongs to Rabbi Judah Loew, the Maharal who legendarily created the golem, and visitors traditionally leave small stones on his grave as a sign of respect, a Jewish tradition that shows someone has visited and remembered the deceased. Let yourself relax as we explore the tradition of Czech glass and crystal making, a craft at which Bohemia has excelled for over 600 years. Czech glassmakers developed techniques for creating clear, brilliant crystal that rivaled and often surpassed Venetian glass. The forests of Bohemia provided wood for the furnaces and potash, from burned wood for the glass formula, while the region's silica-rich sand supplied the primary ingredient. Bohemian crystal became famous for its clarity, its ability to be cut and engraved with intricate designs, and its lead content, which gave it exceptional weight and sparkle. Prague became a center for both the production and sale of this crystal, with workshops creating everything from elaborate chandeliers for palaces and theaters to delicate stemware for wealthy households. The craft survived industrialization and the communist era, and today Prague shops still sell Czech crystal, ranging from traditional cut glass to contemporary art glass pieces. The best examples represent the pinnacle of the glassmaker's art, objects that transform light into beauty, that combine technical precision with artistic vision, that demonstrate how craft traditions can endure across centuries while continuing to evolve. Now breathe deeply and contemplate the story of Rudolf II, the Holy Roman Emperor who ruled from 1576 to 1612 and made Prague his imperial capital, transforming it into one of Europe's great centers of art, science, and culture. Rudolf was an unusual monarch, more interested in collecting art, supporting astronomers and alchemists, and pursuing esoteric knowledge than in the practical business of ruling an empire. He assembled one of the greatest art collections of his time, including works by Albrecht Dürer, Giuseppe Arcimboldo, and numerous other masters. He invited astronomers Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler to Prague, where they made observations and calculations that advanced human understanding of the cosmos. He supported alchemists in their attempts to transmute base metals into gold and to discover the philosopher's stone. He collected exotic animals, mechanical automata, scientific instruments, and curiosities from around the world, creating what was essentially an early museum. Rudolf's reign represented a golden age of intellectual and artistic life in Prague, even as his political authority weakened and his mental health deteriorated. He was eventually forced to abdicate, dying isolated and paranoid in 1612. But his legacy lived on in the city he had enriched with art and learning, and in the astronomical breakthroughs that occurred in Prague during his patronage. Let your mind drift to the tradition of Czech puppetry's continuation in the famous Blacklight Theater, a uniquely Czech theatrical form that emerged in the 1950s and combines puppetry, mime, dance, and lighting effects to create magical visual spectacles. In Blacklight Theater, performers dressed entirely in black manipulate objects and puppets against a black background, with only the fluorescent painted or lit elements visible to the audience, creating the illusion that objects float and move by themselves. This form allows for fantastical effects, characters flying, objects transforming, impossible movements, all achieved through simple but precisely executed techniques. Several theaters in Prague specialize in blacklight performances, often presenting wordless shows that use universal themes and visual storytelling accessible to audiences regardless of language. The form emerged partly because nonverbal theater allowed artists to express themselves during communist censorship without running afoul of authorities who monitored spoken content more closely than abstract visual performances. Blacklight theater represents Czech theatrical innovation and the continuing importance of puppet and visual theater traditions in contemporary Czech culture. Breathe slowly as we explore Prague's relationship with classical music beyond the famous composers we've mentioned. The city has been called the Conservatory of Europe because of its deep musical culture and the high level of musical education among its citizens. Music education in Czech schools emphasizes not just theory, but active music making, with many children learning instruments and singing in choirs. Prague supports multiple professional orchestras, including the Czech Philharmonic, Prague Symphony Orchestra, and Prague Radio Symphony Orchestra, as well as numerous chamber ensembles and early music groups. Churches throughout Prague host regular concerts, often featuring baroque and classical works performed in the architectural settings for which they were originally written. The city's concert halls, including the Rudolfinum, home of the Czech Philharmonic, and the municipal house's Smetana Hall, offer exceptional acoustics and nearly constant programming. For Praguers, classical music isn't a rarefied elite pursuit, but a living tradition, something that remains woven into daily cultural life, accessible and relevant rather than musty and archaic. The evolution of Prague's neighborhoods reveals the city's social and demographic changes over the past century. Žižkov, named after the Hussite military leader Jan Žižka, developed in the late 19th century as a working-class district and maintained a reputation for Bohemian, slightly rough character. It supposedly has the highest concentration of pubs per capita of any neighborhood in Europe. Vinohrady, which means vineyards, developed as a middle-class residential area with elegant apartment buildings and tree-lined streets, and remains one of Prague's most desirable neighborhoods. Holsovice, once industrial and working class, has gentrified in recent decades and now hosts art galleries, farmers markets, and creative enterprises. Karlin, devastated by massive flooding in 2002 when the Vltava overflowed its banks, was subsequently rebuilt and has become a fashionable district mixing renovated historic buildings with modern architecture. These neighborhoods, each with distinct character and history, show how Prague isn't simply a historic center, but a living city with diverse communities, evolving patterns of residence and commerce, and ongoing negotiation between preservation and development, between honoring the past and meeting present needs. The final fact to contemplate as you drift into the deepest sleep concerns Prague's seasonal transformations and the particular quality of light that has attracted painters and photographers for generations. In winter, Prague can be cold and gray, with snow covering the castle and rooftops, creating a fairy tale atmosphere, but also a somber beauty. Spring brings blossoming trees in parks and gardens, longer days, and the revival of outdoor life. Summer fills the city with visitors and warm evenings when concerts are held in palace gardens and people stroll along the river until late. But autumn is perhaps Prague's most enchanting season. The tourism crowds thin. Golden light bathes the baroque facades in warm tones. Leaves turn yellow and red in the parks, and the city takes on a contemplative, melancholy beauty. This autumn light, combined with the morning mist that often rises from the Vltava, creates an atmosphere that seems to belong more to memory or dream than to ordinary reality. Photographers speak of Prague light, something about the angle of the sun, the reflection off the river, the color of the stone buildings. That gives the city a particular luminous quality, as if the centuries of history have somehow soaked into the very light itself, making everything seem touched with the past, beautiful and sad and eternal all at once. As you rest in the deepest peace, let Prague fade into dream, a city of music and silence, of crowds and solitude, of spires reaching toward heaven and foundations sunk deep in time, a place where every stone holds memory, where beauty persists through every trial, where the Vltava flows forever onward, carrying the city's reflection on its surface, connecting past to present to future, carrying all stories, all dreams, all hopes downstream toward the sea, while the city sleeps and wakes and sleeps again, eternal, golden, forever Prague.